I'm Sally Hart from the Hul'q'umi'num Language and Culture Society. Welcome to our shxatth'ustun project. Over the last year, we have created an archive of 20th century photographs of our Hul'q'umi'num. These images came from museums and archives. Our team located and digitized the photos and then worked with elders who described and discussed them in the Hul'q'umi'num language. Then the photos and their stories were shared with the younger generation. For our project, our team led visits to the places depicted in the photos, and they heard the Hul'q'umi'num stories behind the photos. Through this work, we were connected with our rich history and learned much about how modern times are both a change from the old ways and a continuation of our important cultural traditions.
Ancestry tomato at Hanam, Swinning tomato snap, Bernadette Ruby, Sam, Nee Peter. I'm from Quw'utsun. I'm the youngest child of Stz'uminus, Ruby Peter. You're familiar now with my mother, as she has been doing language research and teaching for over 60 years. Donna came to me and she said, okay, you could look after these photographs. You could start working with the museum. I met with Catherine Gagnon and then we also started collecting old photographs of Quw'utsun, the different events that happen locally, things like the parades downtown Duncan, different events that happen within the community, Corpus Christi days, just various events between the 1950, 1960, 1970, 1980. We looked at photographs from way back when, from different things like Thule gathering, little children on canoes. We had photographs that were given to us that had really old backgrounds, places like Cowichan Bay, Cowichan River, Quw'utsun Lake, the various mountains surrounding Cowichan. The reason why we're looking at various photographs is we're comparing the past to the future, and in a sense, it's like reclaiming our history. So we had several different events leading through this project where we brought elders and would show them a photograph and would ask them for a story attached to the photograph in Hul'q'umi'num. The elders would translate it and transcribe it, and it became part of our teaching material. Another good example would be the Xing'wa. There's people in it like Abel Joe, Arthur Joe, Ruby Peter, Teresa Thorne, Elizabeth Charlie. Those are a few names that I could think of right now.
sqwal antha kwashamtna Snuneymuxw Heather Harris Tnitsana Stz'uminus Squamish. I think some of the pictures that come to mind when I think of this project is like all the culture that is seen within some of these photos of mass dance, dance groups, also just seeing Indigenous people outside the longhouses, as we don't necessarily live there all year round anymore.
Sqwal Samnasiaya, Aintha, Dylan George James, Stz'uminus Nasnes, Nitsanat Penelakut Quw'utsun, Halalt and nuw'ilum. When we went to Stone Church, that's when I learned about what would be my Stz'uminus, my great-great-grand uncle, Nuw'ilum, and how he gave permission for Stone Church to build on his land, and how that was one of the first places our Hul'q'umi'num go and pray. My grandfather is Limo Smith, and every time we go down Zahalem, we see that road, Limo Road, and to think that it's his uncle, Tthu. That's my Stz'uminus, and my Seatla is tthu. So it's like I'm piecing together some of the stuff that I didn't know beforehand too, right? I've learned a lot about Samana and the Silver Bridge, I guess. It's been there since 1910. Going down towards the estuary on Page Road, Sahalem. It was really neat going there and taking a photo of that spot. St. Anne's Church. We got to see old photos of the building that was standing there and how a lot of the families have their burial grounds there in front of the church, how they're starting to expand out into the fields just across from them and whatnot. We went to Quw'utsun Lake just up the hill from us here at West Quam. We got to learn about like how our people used to go there and do races and whatnot. Those were my 4 points of focus here on the project. And I got to learn a ton about the histories of the land that I live on today through the eyes of my elders.
So one of the things I wanted to talk about was how we look through these photos and we can see the crafts and the artsmanship within these photos, and you can see them how they are today. And they're still made differently, but they're still very much the same art craft. And we see things that are not how they used to be in the past, how we're not traveling by horse and carriage or traveling through canoe. Things have changed. There's still things that have been carried forward and passed down generation to generation.
Hello, my name is Lawrence George. I'm from the Penelakut Indian Reserve from my mom's side. It's been an interesting time looking and sharing ancestral photos. They sparked a lot of Hul'q'umi'num dialogue and working with some of our elders, Paul Halalt, working with him. The experience was an emotional homecoming as we looked at places and faces that we haven't seen in decades. Even my uncle, Shomnik, his eyes lit up looking at a lot of these old pictures, and he never realized that such pictures of loved ones have ever existed. And he was able to identify a majority of people and places that we brought forward to him, and he provided a lot of good feedback and help to understand what's going on or what happened. But he also noted how much the landscape has shifted and how the forests have overgrown our land, the rivers, but they also carved new paths throughout the land, and he noted all these changes. Really grateful for this opportunity to be working with our wonderful elder, Heitzapka.
So I think some of the pictures that come to mind when I think of this project is like all the culture that is seen within some of these photos. One of my favorite ones was seeing the elder August Jack turning 103, and it just reminded me of my dad telling me about my great great grandmother, Josephine Charlie. She was a wife to Moses Charlie, chief of Cowichan, and she was 107 and she was still walking around, and she liked going to church, Shaker Church, and if she didn't have a ride, she would walk. And so no matter how far it was, she would make sure that she would get there. And so all of Cowichan knew that whether they're indigenous or non-indigenous, they knew her as the walker. And this here is a photocopy of the newspaper that my dad keeps. And our family calls her Little Granny. She was a tiny woman and she made sure she would get to church. And so seeing Elder August Jack in the newspaper just reminded me of my own ancestor. And so this project really made me reflect on my own personal history and connections to culture and connection to language, because this project really helps with language revitalization. And to be able to work with a fluent elder and hear these pictures come to life through stories, it's just an amazing experience. And not everybody gets to do this work that we do. And I think that hearing these stories and students to be able to work with these stories, to hear it, to read it, will help with their confidence in their language learning.
Swam, sqwal, sqwal, shxatth'ustun.
Another photograph that really stuck out in my mind was the event having the mass dancers outside the longhouse, and they're throwing blankets off of the kind of like the rafters of the longhouse. Historically, we were never allowed to show the mass dance or new dancers. The ceremonies had to go deep underground for years because they were forbidden. There's certain protocol attached to the sqwal, the mass dance. Today, no one's allowed to take photographs unless they actually belong to the ceremony. And you're not allowed to take photographs of new dancers because the belief is that you could take their sali away from them. I was sharing with some young people in our community about the photographs that was given to me through the museum, and I was sharing with my children. And my youngest daughter, she got really upset, and she said, how dare they take photographs when it's only families that belong to the ceremony that can take photographs. She got really upset because she was always taught that you never take photographs of those sacred ceremonies. And she said that I don't understand how come it's okay for them to do that when it wasn't okay for our people. But when you reflect on historically, it was very expensive to have a camera. But in comparison to today, everybody has a camera on their iPhone. It's just easily accessible now. Whereas historically, it wasn't accessible. It wasn't easy to get a photograph. HLCS.
This project, funded by the First Peoples Cultural Council, is a reclamation of our history and the images of our relatives. We look forward to continuing to build our archive with the goal of strengthening our language. Hul'q'umi'num, tthu, sqwal.